When I think of mental health, I think of self-care. I think of taking time for yourself. I think of being conscious about your mental processes, how you're feeling mentally, making sure that you're taking care of it and that you're in a good place. Same as physical health, but just with your mind.
A person's emotional or psychological well-being or lack thereof.
I think of how broken the healthcare system is when it comes to mental health. I think stigma was the first word I thought of.
I think about like the things that someone would go through like on a day-to-day basis, like emotionally or mentally, and how that like can create barriers or like not create barriers.
I think of the health that we can't see, and oftentimes it's overlooked because of that. And it's a lot of times hard to just kind of diagnose like whenever there's an issue with it. So yeah, that's what mental health is to me.
I definitely came from communities that didn't openly talk about it. My family and I came to the US when I was 2. We're Filipino. I feel like in the Filipino community, there isn't a lot of talk about mental health. I do know that I took AP Psychology in high school. We talked about mental health a lot, and then obviously being on a college campus, mental health was definitely a really, really big topic.
So growing up, mental health wasn't like a huge thing in my family. Even though my mom wasn't even though she was born here, her parents aren't from here, they're from Central America. So growing up, she never really had this idea of like mental health and like what is anxiety, what is depression. I grew up and I was going through something like emotionally. My mom would just kind of tell me like suck it up or get over it, because those are things that she learned growing up as well.
I don't think I ever heard the word growing up. I think when my anxiety got really bad in like kind of the end of middle school, like towards high school, it wasn't something that me or my family could ignore anymore.
During my medical leave, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And I remember my family didn't understand. I remember my grandma said that my grandpa's medicine was like a beer each night. Not exactly the healthiest. I kind of came to realize that from the communities that they came from and my upbringing, it wasn't something that you talked about. They didn't really have an understanding of anxiety and depression.
So I knew about it probably a lot earlier than like the average child. I have a brother with autism. He's not low functioning, but struggles with day-to-day life. So I learned about mental health and mental illness and mental handicaps at a pretty young age.
My uncle's a therapist. He's a psychiatrist, so we knew it existed, but it's really not something that really talked about, because Black people, that was just a part of Black people's life. It wasn't really mental health, it was like depression. It would go from being happy to being depressed. It wasn't really like a spectrum. And
I think my parents were pretty open about the challenges that my brother faces, and I can see it for myself.
It wasn't until I got into college, honestly, when I started learning about mental health, and even then I was still kind of skeptical about it because it was just so new to me. Whenever I started taking psychology classes and really going in depth and what is this mental health thing and how it can actually be a very biological thing, that's when I started learning about it.
I went to a predominantly white high school. I was one of 4 Black girls in my entire grade. The year before I started there was a suicide for the grade above mine. So as you can imagine, those wounds were still pretty deep, and so I remember it was within the first week they were still offering counseling services for people who knew the girl, and people were still talking about her because at that school everybody knew everybody basically grew up together. They went there since nursery, so it was a pretty big deal. And I'd never really heard of anyone other than on TV or in the media committing suicide before, so it was a big deal.
My first year as a freshman, which was the fall of 2015, Tulane actively promoted services such as CAPS, because the year before there were, I believe, 7 student deaths, 4 being suicides. So Tulane was really trying to promote the fact that students had resources on this campus.
Well, so when I first brought it up at home and we talked about it, my mom just kind of told me that, oh, that's just like something that white people do. Black people don't kill themselves, you know, crazy white kids kill themselves and stuff like that. And so it wasn't really brought to me as, oh, you should be worried about your mental health, or something can go so wrong that you feel like that's your only option. It was brought to me more of, we don't do that.
It's definitely been a roller coaster ride. I probably entered into college not necessarily in the best place, and then when I came into college my first 2 years, it was really rough. Sometimes it's like you don't always have that support. You don't know who to go to. You don't know who you can trust with it, especially if it's your freshman year and it's hitting you hard. Everybody's kind of trying to have fun. You don't want to be the Debbie Downer.
Mental health has been like all over the place. Like I said, growing up, like it was all about like getting over it or sucking it up. So like very much like internalizing it. So whenever I got to college and started learning about these things, it just felt like it kind of like exploded. It was like overwhelming, especially like going from a pretty bad public school in Kenner, Louisiana, going to Tulane, which is a pretty good school. It like took a toll. Like I didn't feel like I belonged here. This was a school for like kids from the north or kids who have money. This was like a huge culture shock for me.
I know my first 2 years were pretty extreme. I didn't know what Tulane was like until I really like started to go to classes, and I didn't realize how much of a toll it would take on my mental health.
In high school, my senior year, I was just so stressed, like about getting into college, making sure I had enough money to go to college, making sure my family was proud of me. I'm the baby, and my sister was like very successful, so it was like I had to match that, if not go succeed that. So I just felt like a lot of pressure on myself, and I really didn't deal with it the best way. I put what I needed to do to maintain myself on the back end. When I got to freshman year, I was like, man, I didn't need to do none of that, to be honest, because I feel like if I just took care of myself a little better, maybe I would have gotten more scholarships or, you know. And ever since then, I've just kind of been putting myself first and doing the things that I want to do. And it's better than being stressed about stuff that I really don't want to do.
When I finally got the courage to take my leave and take the time that I needed, I definitely came back in a much better place, but it definitely still has been an uphill battle.
Being an adult now, I just really have and a public health major, of course, I have a higher awareness of what mental health is, and I can pick up on the signs within me and within like people that I'm close to, because you know you can always tell when something's up with people that you're close to. So I understand that it's not okay to have a negative well-being or to feel as though you're in a negative headspace all the time, and I try not to do that.
After learning how to manage Tulane in a way that like keeps me emotionally and mentally healthy, it's gotten better, and it's still bad, but I'm able to manage.
A lot of it comes from myself because my family has been pretty supportive for the most part. They're not like, oh, you need to be X, Y, and Z. They kind of let me do my own thing. They're pretty understanding if like I want to like change career paths or whatever. Definitely think it's mostly for me, just like wanting to like kind of break that cycle and do better for myself and my family. I didn't come from like the most wealthy background. I mean, we weren't like homeless or anything, but we didn't have like a lot of money. I didn't have like money to fall back on because none of my family members went to college. I'm kind of like a first gen. I felt this pressure, like I need to keep up. This is kind of like all I have right now, and if I don't keep up, like I'm just gonna like fall back into this like vicious cycle of like, you know, kind of being like low income and just not being able to get out of that.
Yeah, I grew up lower income. There's always that voice that's like, you have to make it out. I grew up in a community where there's kind of this continuous cycle of poverty. When I got posse, friends were like, you know, when you get your private jet, don't forget about me, or you can do great big things as a doctor. Recognizing that I have the privilege to be here, I push myself a lot harder because I don't want it to go to waste and I don't want to disappoint people. There's definitely that pressure on my shoulders of we came to the United States for a better life, so you have to work hard, find a career that brings in a lot of money so we can move up and have that journey be worth it. I think it's a lot of personal pressure, but I also think there's that competitiveness that easily comes out at Tulane. You know, a lot of people like, what's your GPA? What'd you get on that test? What'd you get in the class? You know, everybody's fighting to be above everybody else. And sometimes even if you're not a part of that community, just hearing it and hearing that you internalize that and you put that in the back of your head.
I'm a Virgo. I want to do well in school, and my parents have always put a lot of focus on education. They always said that that's like the number one thing, and my mom's a teacher. She's a big believer that like education can get you out of tough situations, which is true. For my parents, they definitely, you know, when I joke about dropping out, they're like, are you sure about like, no?
I think I feel that pressure not so much in my classes, but in like the work that I do on campus. I feel like I know what I've had to go through, and I'm trying in my last year to do as much as I can so that preventable things that deter people mentally and emotionally like don't happen. The way I've always grown up is like you're trying to like leave where you came from in a better place so that the people who come after you like don't have to do the work that could have already been done. My own experiences at Tulane and like the communities that I've involved myself with, and like seeing my friends struggle through very similar but also very different like forms of marginalization pushes me to try and eliminate something that's very easily preventable.
I think it's myself and society and like the school. At one point, I'm trying to be excellent, like be perfect. Everyone already thinks I'm gonna fail. Like the white students here already think I ain't shit, already think I'm stupid. So when I can outscore them like on a test or a paper or a class and like show them that I'm not, and not be that stereotype that everyone says black people are lazy, black people aren't smart, I'm gonna show you what it is. And I really don't have to do that. And that's what I realized, like, it's probably doing more detriment to myself than betterment, because even if I do make an A and I, you know, do better in the class, that's not gonna change how they feel about black people necessarily.
If you've ever been to a CAP session, they allow you to talk and they kind of ask other questions to kind of guide your train of thought. It doesn't really delve deeper. And when I came back from my medical leave, I was actually referred to see somebody else off campus that could delve deeper, kind of try to find a person off campus to see, kind of have some obstacles for figuring it out.
I used CAPS twice during 2 different issues, and both times they were pretty unhelpful. I had to explain like racism, like before I could start explaining like my anxiety. I got white therapists, and I kind of took what I could get because they were both emergency appointments, so I couldn't really pick and choose, but I ended up walking out of the office more anxious and like stressed out because I have gone through like the whole history of racism.
The source that I use is the support group for women of color. Probably the one thing that kind of kept me afloat freshman year. Because even though I learned was taking care of myself, that plus that really like pushed me, because it was ran by 2 black women, 2 intelligent psychologists. So it was just everything. And it was predominantly black. And all the women in the group I still have close connections to.
I actually started going to CAPS about a year ago. So in 2018, I kind of reached my peak. I just couldn't take it anymore. Eventually reached out, because going to therapy, growing up, that was kind of a sign of weakness. So it took me a while to just kind of get around to this idea of therapy. I still go a year later, and I think it's a really great thing that they have here.
If I was giving advice to a first-year person of color at Tulane, just wouldn't let anybody pressure you or stress you out. I just don't see the good in it. It's not good for you. It's not good because of the toxic relationship with them. I would also say get out. Not the movie Get Out, but just get out and mingle. I would have had an easier time transitioning to here from high school if I would have mingled more and gone out and made friends, white, black, yellow, orange, green, or otherwise.
Make your self-care and your self-preservation your number one priority, over your classes, over the people that you hang out with, over the extracurricular things you're involved in. Make sure that you are taken care of and you're taking care of yourself.
Be passionate and be strategic about how you spend your time. Don't do anything just because. And I've really taken that with everything. So I'm gonna watch this Netflix show because I want to, because this is how I want to spend my time, because I don't want to do anything else.
I would tell a freshman that it's okay to walk alone to class, and it's okay to eat alone. It's okay to have alone time for your mental benefit in college. People are you have to be social, you have to party all the time in college. And it's no, if you're tired, don't go out. If you want to sleep, sleep. Like, if you're like, hey, like, I just want to stay in my dorm and watch Netflix all day, do that.
Avenues to stay grounded and to stay true to themselves. I think it's really easy to get sucked into the work hard, play hard, study hard. Create a community for yourself that understands you. I think sometimes that can get really difficult, and you do sometimes have to get out of your comfort zone, but there are people. It just takes time branching out. If you are feeling a little lost, vocalize it. There are people that care on this campus. Sometimes it can start feeling really lonely, and you can feel isolated, but there are people that care and that are willing to hear you.
You're gonna feel like you're the only one here, but you're not. There are a few of us here, maybe not like in huge numbers, but we all kind of go through like the same experience, feeling like, I don't belong here, this is not for me, but realize like that you do, and you're here for a reason, and realize that you have a lot of potential, and if you ever need help, reach out to someone,
Just being here is enough. Your ancestors built this school, and now you're the one learning in the buildings. So I think that's resistance in itself.